The 2025 GMTK Game Jam, one of the biggest game jams in history, just happened. And, wait, what? It happened 3 months ago? Really? The 2025 GMTK Game Jam, one of the biggest game jams in history, happened. How about that? Is that better? Okay, good. And my friend Golden Disguise and I decided to participate. And though we didn't win, I think we managed to produce one of the best games we've ever made. So, without further delay, here is a story on how we made Now, if you haven't heard of the GMTK Game Jam, it's a yearly game jam hosted by the YouTuber Game Maker's Toolkit, and has consistently been the most popular game jam on itch.io for years. What do you mean? Of course they know what a game jam is. Why would they click on this video if... Okay, so in case you don't know what a game jam is, it's basically a competition where game developers come together to work on games in a very short period of time, usually with some theme for the games to follow. And in GMTK's case, literally thousands of people had joined them, now including Golden Disguise and I. You see, despite doing game jams for years, Golden Disguise and I had never joined a GMTK Game Jam. Well, technically I did in 2022, but I didn't end up submitting because making a game where 3D dice attack by rolling each other off balance to do damage ended up being more difficult to create than I thought, and... Sorry, anyway, the point is, this was by far the biggest game jam either of us had participated in, and we were very excited to get started. However, leading up to the game jam, we were running into some roadblocks developing our Steam game, Wizards in the Woods. I won't go into it here, but for those wondering, the reason why the next Wizards in the Woods devlog is taking so long is partly due to said roadblocks. Don't worry though, the issues have been taken care of and the game is still in development. Anyway, come first day of the jam, unfortunately these issues were still hanging over our heads. Could the game jam theme maybe lighten our spirits? Unfortunately, not really. The theme was loop. Now, it's not that this theme was bad, but we definitely struggled to come up with ideas. Usually we decide on an idea within the first hour or two of the theme being announced, but this time, it took all morning and part of the afternoon to finally settle on an idea. In that time, we did come up with some other good ideas, including an infinitely looping racing game idea, but ultimately we decided on one single concept: negative time. It was a very simple idea. You see, with the whole loop theme, I instantly started thinking of time loops, and because of that, a lot of our ideas involved rewinding time, like rewinding time when you got hit. However, that wasn't very unique, but then I thought, what if you go back further each time you got hit? And then I thought, what happens if your time goes negative? Boom, negative time. The whole idea is that each time you get hit, the interval you go back by doubles. And if you go back before you technically started the game, you go into negative time, an out-of-bounds region that contains new weapons to get, but one you can only stay in for a limited period of time, since time is always increasing and getting hit now sends you forward instead of back, until eventually you're back in positive time and the cycle repeats. The genre would be a bullet hell, which I love because of Undertale and Deltarune. However, the game ended up more like Enter the Gungeon, thanks to Golden Disguise's influence. Ironically, I've never actually played Enter the Gungeon. I probably should now though. Anyway, now we had an idea we were happy with. But what about the issue that was still lingering with Wizards in the Woods? Well, luckily, right around the time we came up with that idea, we managed to resolve the issue just in time. So about half a day into the 4-day time span of the jam, we were finally ready to get to work on the actual game. First thing we established was the aesthetic for the game. You see, Golden Disguise is the artist for our games, and he has a very particular art style that is notably not pixel art. However, both of us thought pixel art would actually work really well for this game. So I decided to just lower the resolution of the game to emulate a pixel art style, and voila, it actually looked pretty good. I know, I'm just as shocked as you are, but I think the simplicity of Golden Disguise's style actually worked really well towards being pixelated. We also gave the game a sort of heaven and hell theme with positive and negative time. For example, your player is a little demon and the enemies were white and gold and called things like a cherub or an angel. However, negative time wasn't exactly hell. Instead, we went with a more glitchy, inverted aesthetic for negative time. So all the negative enemies literally looked like positive enemies, but inverted, black and purple instead of white and gold. Anyway, I think the aesthetics turned out great. One of the game's strongest aspects in my opinion. And with it decided it was time to start on actual mechanics, like player movement and the ability to shoot. But of course you need something to shoot at, so on the second day, it was time to add enemies. First was the cherub, which just shoots a burst of 3 slow bullets directly at you. Then we have the Cleanser, an enemy with a sword that creates a slash of bullets if you get too close. Then we got the Seer, which shoots a couple of fast-moving bullets that predict your movement. An enemy that wasn't supposed to be too difficult, but accidentally ended up being really deadly by countering the prominent strategy of just circling enemies. Then we have the Angel, who shoots 8 bullets around itself that each bounce twice. This guy was also extremely difficult, especially in small rooms. Then we have the Reclaimer, who was a support enemy that revived guys once they died by turning back their clock, literally reversing their death animation, which was both easier for us and sick as fuck. Also, they had a funny bug where they could revive themselves and slide around inside their hat, which was just fantastic, top tier bug. Lastly, we have the Geometric Boys. These guys were significantly beefier than the other enemies. One was the Sentinel, which shot a wave of bullets around itself, and the Enforcer, which shot a big exploding bullet at you. In addition to all of these enemies, we also created negative versions of all of them, which all had slightly different characteristics. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but yeah, there was a lot of content here. I'm really surprised we managed to get all this stuff done in such a short period of time, but the fact that all of the negative enemies were just slightly altered versions of positive enemies did help a lot. Now, with enemies in the game, it was finally time to add the selling point of the game, negative time. To make this work, we obviously needed some way to rewind time, and to do that, I made a system where every second, all rewindable objects would store their current state in the Time Manager. Then when you got sent back in time, the Time Manager would rewind all objects to the state they had at the time. Simple, right? No, not really. By the end of the jam, the Time Manager script ended up being a complete mess because I didn't end up having time to refactor any of it. But regardless, we at least got it working well enough by day 2. So going into day 3, we had most of the gameplay done, but no real levels. So I created a bunch of room prefabs that would be used to randomly generate the whole dungeon at the start of every run through the entire game. Not through each run from negative time back to positive time, but through the whole game. The reason why was because I wanted it so that when you go from negative back to positive time, you would get to retry the same layout and get better and better at that layout of the game. Kind of leaning into that whole like rewinding time means you get to retry things over and over again. So yeah, once we had rooms laid out, we could finally kind of play the game. And quickly we realized that getting further in negative time to get weapons was kind of brutal. So to fix this, we decided that when you transition into negative time from positive time, you would be sent further back into the negative time area depending on how far positionally you had gotten into positive time. And although I like this solution, it unfortunately wasn't communicated at all to the player. In hindsight, I think we should have had like a room counter that would literally show you going from like room 7 to -7 when you transition to negative time. That would have been a good way to communicate that mechanic. Then we added the weapons. This included a basic flame gun, the pistol, which shoots piercing bullets that bounce once, the sword, which is just like the cleanser's sword, the bazooka, which shoots one big bullet that explodes, and the portal, which shoots a big laser beam, but has a reload time of 1 whole minute. When you pick a new weapon, you can still switch between any of the weapons at any time, so getting a new weapon always just made you more powerful. So with all of that done, we had the game seemingly almost complete. You could progress through positive time, get sent back into negative time to get better weapons in order to go back and make it further into positive time until you eventually made it to the end. Hooray! However, we weren't done. On the final day, it was time to add the big boy shit. On both ends of positive and negative time, we decided to add bosses. Oh yeah. And if you're wondering why we have a boss at the end of negative time, well, we decided that reaching the end of positive time wasn't actually the end of the game. Instead, when you beat the positive time boss, you get a key. Take that key to the end of negative time and you could unlock the final boss. So, what are these bosses? Well, in positive time, the boss was called the Judge. This big guy would teleport around, shooting lasers and exploding bullets at you. He also had this stopwatch on him, which, like the Reclaimer, would turn time back to revive enemies. But unlike the Reclaimer, the Judge could do it on everyone in the room. So yeah, this guy was pretty tough, but we tried to make him fair. Then, after beating him, you would unlock the final boss, the Executioner. Aesthetically, this guy was just an inverted Judge, but he was significantly harder due to some new attacks, including spawning a wave of bullets when he'd teleport, replacing the lame laser the Judge had with an insane rain attack, and other stuff like the exploding bullets now bouncing. Honestly, we might have made him a bit too difficult, but he is the final boss, so... Anyway, at 2 AM, we were finally done with the actual content of the game. So it was time to go to bed and wait for the jam to end at 10 AM the next day, and... Psych? You thought we'd sleep? Who do you think we are? Normal people? No. We might have been done with the main content, but we didn't even have a main menu yet, or sound effects, or music. So we stayed up all night putting the rest of the game together. As you can imagine, finishing up all the final elements took a while. We didn't even get to the music until like 8 AM, and although I was planning to create my own music for the game, I was too damn tired to try to create a soundtrack for the game 2 hours before the submission deadline, so I threw in some songs I had made for fun months ago that I wasn't planning at all to use for the game, and I finally submitted the game. Needless to say, after all of that, I was so tired. For the next few days, I think I was in sort of a daze. I didn't end up participating in the game jam at all like I normally do. Because of that, the end of the voting period kinda snuck up on me, and before I knew it, the results were in. And our score was not great. This is due to several factors, including a lack of votes, which meant our game's score was reduced, the game being extremely difficult, which was somewhat purposeful, but mainly accidental from a severe lack of playtesting, and due to some major game-breaking bugs that literally froze the game about half the time when you tried to first play it. So, despite our monumental efforts, it didn't do that well. However, honestly, I didn't really care that much. Why? Well, when we submitted the game, we also shared it with our friends, and over the next week or two, my friend, Uninterested Robot, proceeded to play the game practically non-stop in order to beat it. Honestly, this was the highlight of the whole thing for me. Watching someone else genuinely enjoy our game and try really hard to beat it was really motivating. In fact, it was so motivating that after the game jam was over, we went and fixed all of the soft locks and other glitches that my friend had found. In this post-jam update, we didn't plan on adding any extra content, but we ended up adding just a little bit. You see, one of the biggest problems with the game was that going AFK in positive time was a legitimate strategy to get farther in the game. How lame is it that a legitimate strategy for the game was just to not play it? To fix this, we added one last type of enemy, the jury. Not only did these guys complete the trio of trial-themed enemies, but also fixed the issue by swarming you if you AFK in an empty room for more than 15 seconds. What was cool about this was that the essence of the strategy could still be done. Stalling could get you more time, but now you actually had to play the game by fighting against the jury to do it well. We also added clock items to the game in positive time. The point of them was to try to make it not quite so punishing in positive time to get hit a few times, by having an item that would prevent the time interval you go back by from doubling when you get hit. In practice, I'm not sure I like this item too much, but it did more or less fix the problem of positive time being extremely difficult to get through. And with all of that done, negative time was complete. Overall, even though it didn't do very well in the game jam itself, I'm super happy with how the game turned out. As I said, the game is extremely difficult. I'm the only one, to my knowledge, that has ever beaten the game. Not even my friend Uninterested Robot has beaten it. So if the game looks fun to you and you want to be one of the first ones to ever beat it, give it a try on itch.io. But believe it or not, that's not the end of Negative Time's story. See, even though we managed to pack a lot of content into the game in 4 days, we still have new ideas. This game, in my opinion, is one of the best games Golden Disguise and I have made. And it would be a shame if we didn't expand it into a full game. So we've decided that we are going to publish this game on Steam as our first Steam game under our new name, Round Owl. Now immediately, some of you might be confused, since in my very last video I announced Wizards in the Woods was going to be our first Steam game. But don't worry, as I said before, Wizards in the Woods is still happening, but it's just going to take a little bit more time than we thought. So we have decided to make Negative Time as our first Steam game instead, and give Wizards in the Woods a bit more time to cook. The main reason for this decision is pretty simple. Negative Time, scale-wise, is way easier for us to create as our first Steam game. So we are going to be taking a break from Wizards in the Woods to work on Negative Time over the next few months in order to release Negative Time on Steam sometime at the start of next year. This would be the moment where I would tell you to wishlist the game on Steam, but unfortunately we don't have a Steam page up. So instead, I want to invite you to our Discord server for Round Owl. There we will be posting updates on Negative Time and Wizards in the Woods, as well as just hanging out with you guys. So if you want to stay up to date with our stuff, consider joining. Or you can just subscribe to be notified of my next devlog, whatever you want. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Again, if you want to play the current version of Negative Time, check it out on itch.io, link in the description. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!